I think the one thing that every person I've ever met has wanted was flexibility and that freedom to work when they're working at their best in an environment where they can be their authentic selves. And I mean, at the end of the day, if organizations can enable that, whatever it, no matter what that looks like for their organization.
Right. Welcome to Authentic Energy, a podcast dedicated to getting to the bottom of what it means to be your true, authentic self at work. I am your host, Wendy Brand, a former corporate executive turned transformation coach. Let's take this learning journey together as I meet with guests weekly to learn how they've managed, or not managed, to find the elusive boundaries and success in their career and what it really means to find balance. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm really excited about my guest this week, but I'm also really excited to share that I've added an online group program to my workshops and retreats. This 6-week program is called Unleash Your Authentic Energy, and it starts on June 16th. So if you're feeling discontent in your work environment, struggling to find balance or harmony in your life, feel like you've been asleep at the wheel or on autopilot for the last however long, I will take you through a program that I've created based on my 3 decades of experience in different business sectors and levels of leadership, and what I've learned in the last 6 months about burnout and how it can be prevented. This collective will be a place where you'll reconnect with your values and what's important to you. Map out a plan for how you can live a fuller, more purposeful, successful life, and connect with others that are seeking the same thing. So if you're interested or you know someone who might be interested, check out my website at wendybrandcoaching.com. Okay, so we kicked off the culture series last week with culture expert Delise Simmons. It was such a great conversation, so if you did not catch that, you should go back and listen. Today's culture conversation is through the lens of a chief people officer. Heidi Hauver is an innovative and strategic people leader who partners with companies as a fractional chief people officer. So for those of you that do not know what the fractional part means, it just means that they contract as the HR executive leader on a part-time or advisory basis. So they're able to work with more than one organization at a time, which I think sounds amazing. But Heidi is a people leader that has led organizations through transformation and continues to provide executive leadership, advisory, coaching, and mentorship to CEOs, founders, executive directors, HR leaders at all stages in their career journey. And if you've been listening to the podcast at all, you know that I believe that there is a role that the individual plays to care for their well-being, but there's also the role of the organization to create an environment where employees can thrive. That environment is the culture. This conversation with Heidi explores some people strategies that can be part of the backbone of the culture, placed there to facilitate the core values and behaviors that we're seeking. Heidi has had an amazing career so far, and I'll share her entire bio in the show notes. But let's jump into this conversation with Heidi Hauver. Heidi, thank you so much for joining us today on the Authentic Energy Podcast. I am so happy you're here.
It's good to be here. I'm happy we can spend our time together.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. So start out by telling us a little bit about your journey and kind of where you are today.
I've had a really interesting journey. I'm actually based in Ottawa, Canada's capital city. And I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Quebec, about an hour east of Montreal, but I relocated here as a young person, about 20. And I was putting myself back through school, working full time. I was in school for a long time and I pursued HR. It was my first course in college and I loved it. And I thought, wow, I'm going to keep pursuing it. And I went to school forever and put myself through school. I always say I was practicing during the day. I was getting the theory at night. I was a really great student in the project work because I would be like, hey, this is what's happening in the real world. And we could really kind of add that into some of the work we were doing. I'll often tell people that the year I graduated from university was the same year I was a director of HR. And I also won a 40 under 40 award. I was recognized in our meeting for that. And that is not a clear pathway, isn't? And I share that story often because our careers are like this, right? They do zig and zag. And sometimes you take 2 steps forward. Sometimes you kind of make lateral moves. And my career is like that for sure. it's been in HR for the last, I would say, 20 years, and I've had the ability to continue to grow my leadership throughout organizations, both through work I've done that I've gotten paid for, and also in the community work that I've done, which hopefully we can talk a bit about. And I've gotten to that level where, I've been a VP and a chief people officer for organizations. I've spent a lot of work in the tech sector as well as the not-for-profit sector, but mostly in the technology sector. I love the innovation in the space and the energy and just the brilliant minds that I get to connect with on a daily. So it's a kind of quick snapshot of me.
Yeah. And what is success for you? Like, do you have a definition of success? Has it changed over time?
I'm redefining it all the time. Yeah. I think that, in hindsight, I wish I had written it down every 5 years and seeing the progression and the evolution. It has changed. What I define today is very different than what I defined when I started out, because I remember I actually defined where I am right now as that definition, being a chief people officer for a global organization, and everything that comes with that. And I achieved that, and I'm proud of that. Work, it's more about the work. It's more about the impact. It's about the purpose. At the root, I think, again, my why is about helping others and also getting growth, personally and professionally along the way, having a really broad impact, making a difference. I'm really at the stage where I want to do great work. I want to make an impact. I want to live my best life. I'm still defining that. I'm still figuring that out.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about what it looks like to be a fractional CHRO and what some of that work would be. I can only imagine as a fractional CHRO and being able to touch multiple companies, the impact that you can have. Yeah. And so what are some of the big things that you'd like to work on?
I've had the ability to work with a variety of different companies. And the thing that I've always appreciated, each of them have their own context. They're at a different stage in their growth. But at the end of the day, generally speaking, when you look at what makes people happy at work, creating a safe culture where everybody can bring their authentic selves, being, helping companies differentiate themselves, and often what in the technology sector, a very competitive environment. I think that is work that I enjoy. I've often been in companies that have grown really quickly, and that has forced you to be really innovative because you don't have a lot of time, energy to plan. So I don't like to overplan. I like to pilot things. I like to try things out. And the big win for me, and I think, and I call it a win because it's a big lesson, is bringing people in as part of the solution. So not having all the answers as the head of HR or the advisor to the CEO, actually helping to mentor and encourage, the executives that I'm working with to go deep into their organizations to find out what matters to your people. And I think that when we're looking at total rewards and rolling out different programs, whether it's a health and wellness initiative or whether it's a new initiative that is really related to total rewards, like a 401 or RSP or an employee stock option plan, what matters to your team is going to be very different than someone else's. I would say that, most companies experience similar puzzles, right? Those things that can be solved. But I think you've got to, go look at the leadership team, their style, and make it authentic for them as well, so that they feel like as they're moving something through their organization, they can really stand behind it because it's true to their values.
Yeah. And you mentioned total rewards, and I have two questions on that topic. The first is really meeting people where they are and what they need. And so just in general, and I know it's probably different by organization, but is there anything that you would say to any leaders out there that are trying to look at how can we create inclusive programs where everyone can access what they need?
I think starting by, leaning in and asking some really good questions about what it is your team wants and needs. I think that, often, and things evolve. And I think that a lot of times, programming gets stagnant. because we think, oh, this worked really well 10 years ago. Well, it may not work well anymore. And a really current example of that would be working in the office versus working remotely.
Right.
Most organizations wouldn't have thought they would ever enable their team to be able to work remotely. They didn't think it was possible. Pandemic happens around the world. Everybody goes remote, and everyone's trying to find, what's next for us. And that's going to mean different things for different organizations. I think the one thing that every person I've ever met has wanted was flexibility and that freedom to work when they're working at their best in an environment where they can be their authentic selves. And I mean, at the end of the day, if organizations can enable that, whatever it, no matter what that looks like for their organization. Right. I mean, I recognize that, in the technology sector, it tends to be a little bit more favorable to be able to work remotely. Not every sector,
right.
can provide that same level of freedom and flexibility from where you work. It doesn't mean that you can't establish other ways to provide your team the same level of freedom and flexibility. It just may look different. And I think we need to continue to have those conversations. So first and foremost, whenever I go into an organization, I'm always kind of getting a sense of, how do you connect with your team? How do you capture feedback? What are you doing with that feedback? We've all worked for organizations that do a lot of good work capturing feedback. But then when you peel the onion back and go, what are you doing with it? They go, what do you mean? And you go, okay,
yes.
Well, if you don't do anything with the feedback, there's no feedback loop. You're not closing that off.
Right.
And stop asking, because they're not going to give you any more insights, right? But if you show that you're listening, that you're hearing them, even if you're just closing the loop to say, hey, listen, we heard these 3 things are on your mind. It doesn't mean you need to have a solution tomorrow, but you need the feedback loop. You need to let them know, we've heard you, you matter. We find this really interesting. We're exploring these 3 to 5 things. We're going to circle back in this time frame. And I think that that's a really critical step that a lot of companies miss. There are, and again, the intentions are really good on the offset. Let's do a survey. But if you don't have a plan on what you're going to do with those results after, wait.
Yes.
The survey until you get a plan.
That's great. That's great advice. I've seen the same thing at organizations, and it does, in the long run, if you're not ready to act, then it does hurt you, because like you said, they'll stop replying, or they don't trust. You're breaking the trust there. My other question around total rewards is around pay transparency. And I'm just curious and I've never been in an organization that's had pay transparency. In my mind, it seems like it's a great way to build trust with the employee base. Have you been in an organization that's done that successfully?
Ironically, some of the nonprofits and government agencies, where they often get the rap of not being as innovative, they do this pretty well, right?
That's a great point.
Because they're much bigger organizations, they have the structure internally. And, pay transparency, I think it's fantastic. It doesn't happen overnight, because you need to have the internal structure to enable you to be able to share, but you have to have the structures in place to be able to create the salary banding and doing the market research and so forth. And I think we need to evolve to that. Absolutely. I think that, as I can speak to the tech sector mostly, we've really been evolving our practices around, what we're even doing when we're going to ask to, hey, come join us, right? I'm big on this, where I wish organizations would stop using cultural fit and start using cultural add. When you're going to add to our company. And I think, even when we look at the job descriptions, things like using gender decoders to make the job descriptions more inclusive, removing education if it's not really required in the job. There's a bunch of things we can start doing today to get us ready. So those organizations that say we're not ready to do pay transparency, okay, what's the plan to get there? Let's start by making our job descriptions more inclusive. Let's start by making sure that the interview process enables individuals to see themselves within the organization, that we have diverse, panels, and that we are making sure that we're responding to candidates in a human way and not using our bots. I would say that a lot of companies that I've engaged with, even companies I've applied to, they're not putting their personality into the email response. And we know that it's automated. It takes literally probably 15 minutes to really differentiate yourself as a business by just automating the, automated response, putting a little bit of your culture and your personality into that response that the candidate gets. That's their first point of connection with you. You make it count. Everybody's at different stages and ages of where they're at. Not everybody has the same set of resources, right? Maybe with the same set of expertise, but there are some things you can do today that can get you there. And I would think more of a formulate plan, phase one, kind of to that full transparency. And every year, every 6 months, kind of commit to doing something to get you closer.
Just kind of biting off, chunks at a time, because really we are, the business itself typically is going through such change, and especially in tech, where you're constantly evolving. The product is changing, the environment is changing, and then to add on those business processes that need to change and evolve along with the organization. Having been in a change role before, I know that the employees just have change fatigue. It's just so much change, but it is so important to stay modern in our approach to hiring and rewarding and retaining.
And let's talk about change, because I think, the world is going through a lot of change.
Yeah.
It's not the first time I put it out there. The world needs more kindness, and what can we do is, to be our best selves and show up each and every day, right? To be great colleagues and, great partners at work. And, I think that at the end of the day, the communications piece is so critical. When we don't say things in an organization, like maybe we as a leadership team, maybe we're on a team together and we really care about pay transparency. We have a vision to get there in 2 years, but we don't talk about that internally. We don't share the vision of where we want to go. Well, if we're not saying anything that and we're not being transparent about that, our team isn't going to know, and they're going to create their own narrative and think we don't care about this. And it doesn't mean that we don't. It just means that maybe we have a different time frame of when we can achieve it. And I think that, change is hard. And I think, change happens at work, outside of work. There's a lot of things happening on any given day. And I think that, at the end of the day, as leaders, some of the things I've thought about a lot over the years is, sometimes we have to break it down to the basics of just, being great communicators, being available for our team. And again, because people will create their own narratives if you give them nothing. And sometimes as leaders, we need to say, you know what, Wendy, I'm sure you can appreciate, and my previous teams will have heard me say this, I'm sure you can appreciate, I'm not in a position to discuss this right now. With that said, we know it's important to you, it's important to us, and we're going to circle back with you as soon as we can.
Right.
And that is enough, because they know I've got their backs. They know I've just told them, you matter to us.
Yes.
We know this is important to you. We need a little bit of time, and that's okay. I know no one is expected, just because you have leadership in your title or you're part of the leadership team, then all of a sudden now you're supposed to be like this magic magician and you know all the answers. That is actually not the case. My view on great leadership is that you're willing to actually own up to, I don't have all the answers. However, I'm going to be, the conduit to, give me your feedback so I can take it to where it needs to. So we've got informed ideas, informed information, so we can make the right decisions to give you the information that you're looking for.
Yes, that's great. Communication is critical. And, talking about change fatigue and just being tired in general, the burnout word, there was, the great resignation, and I experienced it myself, left my company in October. I believe there has to be a way to create an environment where employees want to stay, and that they're protecting their energy, doing things that they're passionate about. I mean, I know this sounds idealistic, but when it relates to burnout and really taking care of the employee population, is there anything, any guidance that you would provide other leaders in how to really create that environment so that employees can thrive and not deplete their energy?
Listen, I'm laughing only because we've all experienced the Sunday scaries,
Yeah.
right, in our
Yeah.
careers. We all have. We know people who are going through it right now. I'm not afraid of turnover in business.
Yeah.
I'm not. I think it is a natural course of the world of work. I think we need to embrace it a little bit differently. I think we need to look at it as opportunities for change for that individual that maybe they feel like maybe you needed to go spread your wings, to somewhere else. You're going to grow and, get new knowledge and experience. And maybe you'll bring that back. Many years ago, and I've talked about this before, a company I knew in California, and I wish I could give them credit. If they're out there, they'll have to let me know who they are so I can. But they actually give out like physical boomerangs to people when they leave the organization. And so I adopted that after hearing about it and started telling clients that I worked with, give out the boomerang. What do you mean? Just because Heidi leaves the organization doesn't mean that I might not be a valuable person to the organization 5 years from now.
Right.
If you stay in touch with me and you stay connected, if we got a connection now, it doesn't mean that has to go just because I've decided to go spread my wings to a different organization. So I know I'm not answering the question 100%, but I want to start by, we need to reframe as business leaders how we look at resignations and how we look as it's not always about us. It's sometimes just about that person.
Yes.
Needing to do something for them. And we need to celebrate that. We need to recognize that. I've had people leave my teams in the past. I've rehired people multiple times. I have some of my closest friends are people that have been on my teams. And it's because they knew that when they came to me, I would celebrate them. I would empower them and uplift them. I'm not going to push them out the door, but I'm definitely going to help them along their journey. I think that's really critical, right? And I don't think it has to be the bad news story it is when someone decides they want to move on. It's how we look at it as an organization and how we look at the opportunity. How do we stay connected with this person? They're amazing. We want them to come back after they've gained maybe another 10 years of experience somewhere else, right? I do think, though, that there are ways, as you said, to look at how do we create environments where people are wanting to stay and grow in our organizations. And ultimately, I've never met someone who has said, nope, I'm good. I don't want to grow. I don't want to grow personally. I don't want to grow professionally. Leave me be, Heidi. I'm good. I mean, I think we need to make the time. And as simple as it is, I am going to put this out there. When was the last time you talked to your team member and said, what is it that makes you happy? What work are you excited to do that you're not doing right now? I'm not talking about big promotion,
right,
an next pay increase. I'm just talking about a simple conversation of, Wendy, when was the last time like you really lit up and had this aha moment? Is there someone on the team you want to learn from? Is there somebody you want to shadow? These are simple things we can do that doesn't take a lot, doesn't take a huge budget. It's just literally starting with the conversation. We don't have enough of those conversations. I think one of the other things that I have spoken about before that I think is really important is, and I'm going to put it out there, and it's not a bold statement. I think it's just a realistic one. I haven't always been fulfilled in the work that I've been doing. I need to get that fulfillment in other ways. And that might be like crazy town to some people, but I think it resonates for most of us. When you look back at your career, you go, well, it wasn't fulfilled each and every day.
Right.
For me, I've gotten that fulfillment throughout my career. Sometimes because I was eager and I wanted something more and I wasn't getting it fast enough. I leaned into the community and I started doing a lot of volunteer work. And I started learning and growing in a different way in different organizations. I got the ability to lead long before anyone would pay me to do it in the volunteer sector. I expanded my network immensely. I grew personally, I grew professionally, and I brought that work with me as I grew in my day job, right, as a leader. But I also recognize that, fulfillment's not going to always come from the day job. So how do you get it in other aspects of your life? And it's also okay to be okay with that. And in the moment, it's not like I was sharing with my employer, I'm not getting all the purpose, this is not purposeful for me, but I knew as part of the journey, I'm going to go suss it out in other areas. Even at the beginning of the pandemic, I remember feeling like a lot of us, the unknown was really scary. We not gone through a global pandemic before. Things were changing so quickly. And right before the pandemic, I brought together a bunch of women and we started a lean in circle. And it wasn't my original idea. It was a friend who was starting one. And I said, anyone who can't do the evening one, I'll do one during the day, because I had young children and I couldn't do the evening. And so we created this big group of women, and we came together once before the pandemic hit, and then we went online. Now, over the 3.5 years, that core group of women have stayed about 5 or 6. We still come together every month. And that was me at the time knowing I needed something different. So, and I've said this previously, I got to get the t-shirt, right? Don't wait, create those opportunities for yourself. If you're not getting fulfillment, be bold to have that conversation. Shoot your leader an email and say, could we, in our next one-on-one, talk about a really cool project I'd like to kind of work on, or an area that we haven't explored together? I think often, don't be the victim, right? Don't be that person, right? Like, show up for yourself, and take some ownership in your success. As we said at the top of the call, define it, but then own it. Be willing to kind of have some of those conversations.
I 100% agree, Heidi. I do, I believe it is the individual's responsibility. They have to own their development, because it's their life, right? And it's up to you if you're going to be fulfilled or not. And if you're not getting it at work and you can do some nonprofit work or whatever fills your bucket, I think that's great. I do think there is, like you said it so well, it's some really simple things that leaders can do by just asking and not being afraid of the answer, right? If they say, well, I'd rather be working on this team, and you've got a stack of work that you need to make sure that person delivers on, that may be a reason you don't want to know. But at the end of the day, if they're not happy, that work isn't going to be done probably as effectively, as efficiently, as well as it could be done by someone that is more passionate about it and excited to be doing the work, or committed. So it's a two-way, it's a partnership, but the individual ultimately owns it. It's their experience.
You're right. It is a partnership. And, I always do this thing called setting expectations for a powerful start when I work with an organization or work with someone new. And it is about setting those bases. What motivates you, Wendy? When do you do your best work? How am I going to know when you're frustrated? And early days, I would just ask the new person. We embedded this into our orientation. It would be a one-way discussion. And I remember having this aha moment going, whoa, like, this is wrong. Like, this is a two-way conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Back to what you said, this is a partnership. I need to know how my leader, when they do their best work and when they're going to be frustrated, and how they like to get feedback. And so it's just further reinforces your point. It is a partnership. And if we look at it like that right from the onset, it's a very different experience, right?
Yes. Wow, Heidi, I could talk to you for hours, but we do need to start wrapping up. And
We'll have a part 2.
Yes, we will. But I want to get to some of these personal questions because they're fun. So, what's the one thing in your life that just brings you joy?
My family, for sure, and that is I learned so much from my kids. And you may have heard me if you were on that last podcast talking about parenting and leadership. But I think I underestimated, this journey as a parent and how much I would learn. And I give them full credit for helping me kind of even make some of the career changes I have and really kind of hone in on life is short. I want to be my best self for them, for me. I want to do great work that inspires me. What do I want to be remembered by? And that really is getting inspiration from them. And they're at this age where they're asking a lot of questions about, what they want to be when they grow up. And they're only little. They're both under 8. But I'm inspired by that. I want to be a great role model. I don't want them to ever see me not being at my best, loving what I'm doing. And in those moments when I'm not, they know that I'm courageous enough to make those changes, not just for me, but for all of us, so we can get that kind of harmony that I was talking about at the beginning.
Beautiful. I love it. Okay. And if you could go back and tell your younger self, maybe your 5 or 6-year-old self, go back and tell her something, what would you tell her?
I would probably say to that 5-year-old self, find work that is your passion, and don't be afraid to make the changes you need to kind of along that journey, celebrate the journey, and enjoy it. Just enjoy it. I think it isn't about the destination, and I'm not the first person to talk about that. I won't be the last, but I think we do forget to kind of recognize that the journey is supposed to be fun. Yes, it's going to be hard, but we need to celebrate the wins. We need to be our biggest champion, and we need to be okay to kind of make the changes we need to kind of find that authentic happiness and joy that we all deserve.
Yes. Love it. Okay. One more question for you. Travel. I love to travel, but what is your most favorite place that you've visited? And then what's on your bucket list?
So I'm going to plug the Eastern Townships in Quebec is home. I love going back there, but the thing I love most about it is the culture and the beauty. And the people. Our family is, just getting our kids into traveling after the pandemic. It's been a kind of a long time. We're seeing a lot of Canada. And so, BC to Halifax, and we're trying to explore as much as Canada as possible. And I think we have a real appreciation for what our country offers. And we want to show our children that beauty and the people and just that spirit that I think, I haven't seen a lot of Canada, and I want to see it too. So I've traveled beyond the borders more than I have within my own borders. And we've kind of shifted gears and are focusing really more on exploring our own country and the beauty that is within it.
I love that. One of the first trips that I took, like ever, that I got on a plane. I think a sophomore in high school, and I went with my church to go work with another church, and we went to British Columbia. Amazing. And oh my gosh, it was gorgeous. Like, just what a great first trip for me to take. It was just beautiful. And I haven't, I've been back maybe once or twice, but I love it up there. I need to visit more often. Heidi, this has been so great. I really just appreciate your time. And it was so great to meet you via Zoom. Thank you so much. And I hope you'll come back for a part 2.
I would love to come back, Wendy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. All right, here are my takeaways. Number 1, success can be more about impact and purpose, having a broad impact and making a difference while still innovating and creating. Number 2, work-life harmony is language we can use instead of work-life balance. Number 3, create a safe culture where people can be authentic, helping organizations differentiate themselves and bringing people in to help with the solutions. Number 4, for organizations wanting to connect with their employees, it's about mentoring and encouraging executives to go deeper into the organizations to find out what is important to their people. What is important to your team and company is different for every organization. Lean in and seek to understand. Number 5, everyone wants the freedom and flexibility to work at a time that works best for them and in an environment where they can be their authentic selves. Look for ways to provide that in whatever form that looks like for your organization. Number 6, it is important to connect with your team and capture feedback. But what do you do with that feedback? If you don't have a plan for what you will be able to do with those results, then wait to gather the feedback. Number 7, nonprofits are a great example of how organizations can be transparent about pay. Number 8, if creating pay transparency is too big of a leap, you can start by looking at how you attract talent. Look at your job descriptions. Stop using cultural fit and start using cultural add. Use gender decoding. Remove education if it's not really important to the job. And put your personality into the automated responses that are going to the applicants. Number 9, part of creating a strong culture is preparing the organization for change and communicating in a timely manner. People will create their own narrative if we don't say anything. Even when there are confidentiality things at play, you can still set the tone of more to come. Number 10, create opportunities for employees to learn and grow. When was the last time that you said to your team, What is the work that makes you excited? Give employees an opportunity to shadow or do work with other teams so that they can continue to grow. Number 11, fulfillment is not always going to come from the day job. Create opportunities yourself, whether it is creating a community outside of work or volunteer for a nonprofit. Don't wait. Create those opportunities. Next week, we'll continue the culture series with my returning guest, Pam Nimick. Pam is an expert in culture and brings her unique wisdom from a communications angle. You won't want to miss that episode. And don't forget to check out my website at wendybrandcoaching.com/retreat for all the information on my upcoming workshops, retreats, and now 6-week online program. That's it for this week. More to come on culture next week. Until then,